Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today what we are going to be going over is the 2020 presidential election between incumbent President Donald Trump versus the Democratic challenger Joe Biden in their, basically in looking at the map due to the 538 latest polling averages in each state. So this might be a little bit of a longer video, but nationwide right now, I believe, if it'll load here. Yeah, nationwide, Joe Biden is currently leading by 9.3 points. A very small convention pump, if you want to call it that, but it still is quite notable, especially for a Democratic challenger this far away. Okay, looking at the state of Alabama, a safe state for President Trump. He may even get a polling bump for himself. For the state of Alaska, there haven't been too many polls. However, I'm just going to characterize that as my own characterization of likely, as I think it will be between 5 and 15 points. Next up, we are going to do the state of Arizona. Currently, Biden is leading by 4.8 points. That's very close to a likely characterization, but it's still going to be lean for the time being. Next up is the state of Arkansas. No real polls. I'm just going to leave it as, solid, as I generally don't trust this poll too much. Next up is the state of California. Biden leading by 32 points, not even in contention. Next up is the state of Colorado, almost 15 points. It's almost a safe state for Joe Biden. However, currently it is going to be a likely state. Next up is the state of Connecticut. Biden currently leads by almost 22 points. Went to Hillary Clinton by under 15. Definitely huge gain for Vice President Biden. Next up is Vice President Biden's home state of Delaware. Going to be a safe Democratic seat, no matter what, likely. Next up is the state of Florida. Joe Biden's actually leading by 6.4%. Like back in March, he had a very small lead. Then Trump took over, or it started to narrow out. And eventually, Joe Biden's just been expanding on his lead ever since. And because of that, Florida is a likely characterization. It's the same characterization that we have for the state of Colorado, which, if you were to tell me this, last year, I would think you're absolutely crazy. I forgot to mention the state of D.C., or the District of Columbia. That would be safe. It's the most Democratic, district in the entire country. Next up is the state of Georgia. Donald Trump currently has a very, very narrow lead. Biden used to, lead in the state. However, he's not doing so anymore. Very close state. Very interesting to see how it goes on the night. Next up is the state of Hawaii. No actual polls there, but going to be safe Democratic no matter what. Next is the state of Indiana. Trump is leading by about 13.3 points. That gives it a likely characterization. Probably not too contested, but you never know. Idaho and Illinois, there are no polls for there either. I forgot about those. However, they're probably not going to be contested as well. Next up is the state of Iowa. Very, very close again. However, Biden did lead back in June when he was, peaking. However, President Trump currently has a very narrow lead in the state of Iowa. Next up is the state of Kansas. Trump has a 8.2 lead. Pretty interesting, considering the fact that Kansas used to be a very solidly Republican state. However, has been narrowing up and even has a Democratic governor and has a new Democratic representative. Next is the state of Louisiana. Again, not too many polls. Probably going to be safe. Potentially can be, likely, but probably not. In the state of Maine, 10.8 points. That's a likely characterization. I'm just going to characterize all of Maine as that, as they're not individually polling each congressional district, since Maine is a little tricky. Next up is the state of Maryland. Now, probably going to be a safe Democratic state, no matter what. Next is the state of Massachusetts. Biden leading by about 33 points, and no sort of contention from Trump by any means. Next up is the state of Michigan. Biden leads by 8 points, one of his highest leads that he had. He led back in June, when he was peaking, at about almost 10 points. Not as bad, not as good. However, a huge margin for, flipping a state. Next up is the state of Minnesota. A state that I think is probably going to be a little closer than people expect. However, 5.8 points, that's still a likely characterization. It's kind of weird that Minnesota's to the right of Michigan. However, things change. Next up is the state of Mississippi. Trump leads by 11.9 points. Probably going to stay like that or, happen on election day. I doubt it's going to be into a lean or even a tilt or even going into the Biden column. I don't see that happening. Next up is the state of Missouri. Again, very close in the polls back in 2016. However, Hillary Clinton lost by almost 20 points. However, Biden's currently leading by 4.7 points, which has it as a lean characterization. I don't see that happening. However, if things go well for Biden, it easily could. Next up is the state of Nebraska. They don't poll Nebraska at large, but I'm just going to say it's safe for the Republicans. Next up is the state of Nevada. 7.8 is the margin of lead that Joe Biden currently has. I can see that happening on election day as well. Then it is the state of New Hampshire, 9.3 points. Very solidly, Joe Biden, like Democratic, considering the fact that it was only decided by, I think, 0.1 points back in 2016, one of the closest states. Next, we have the state of New Jersey. He's leading by 20 points, Joe Biden. Improving on Hillary Clinton's margin. The state of New Mexico, not too many, polls. However, it is a little interesting to consider the fact that, President Trump is more approved in the state of New Mexico than he is in Colorado. However, he's expected to do a little bit more, better in the state of New Mexico. However, I'm still just going to keep it as a likely characterization as of this time. Trump could easily get a, convention bump. However, Joe Biden didn't really get one. I doubt he's going to get one either. State of New York, Trump says that he's going to make a play for it. However, 26.1 points in Biden's favor as of this moment. Next up is the state of North Carolina. Biden's currently leading by 1.9 points. That, for me, is a lean characterization. It is pretty significant that, a state that very, very narrowly went to Barack Obama back in 2008, being to the right of Indiana, which is insane that it would even flip this time around. That it is doing so well for Joe Biden is pretty concerning for the Trump campaign. However, things can always change. Next up is the state of North Dakota, going to be safe Republican, even though there isn't too many polls. State of Ohio, Trump is leading by 0.1%. I'm very tempted to just leave this as a toss-up. However, it's not even, so I'm just going to give it tilt Trump. However, this being one of the closest states on polling could go to Joe Biden. The fact that Barack Obama did win it both times in his re-election and election campaign is a little worrying for the Trump campaign. Oklahoma, Trump only leads by 22.3 points. That still is a significant lead. However, it's definitely drastically reducing the margin that Trump won back in 2016. State of Oregon, no polls out of there. However, it's probably going to be safe on election night. Next up is the state of Pennsylvania, Joe Biden's, the state that he grew up in. He used to have a strong lead, about 8 points back in June. However, it's narrowed down to about 6.3 points, still a likely characterization. I expect it to get a little closer, though, by election day. Rhode Island, no polls out of there. However, probably going to go to Joe Biden by a safe margin. Next up is the state of South Carolina, 5.9 points, getting close to a lean margin. I can easily see, Biden doing pretty well here, and I can even see in 2024 or 2028 that it could be a toss-up state or potentially even go for a Democrat. If anything, if this were to be an election like 2008, I could definitely see South Carolina be the Indiana of 08. Next up, we are going to go over the state of South Dakota. No polls out of there, however, probably going to go for President Trump by a very significant margin. Then the state of Tennessee. Trump is only leading by 11.1 points, which is pretty crazy considering the fact that this is a safe Republican state. I don't see it being in this margin. If anything, it'll go for Trump by, maybe at best case scenario for Trump. No, sorry, for Trump, for Biden, maybe 17 points for him. However, I see it going for over 20 points for Trump. Let's be realistic here. Next is the state of Texas. Very contested. Biden actually is making a play for the state of Texas because it is getting so narrow. However, it is going to be a lean margin for Biden as of this time. He used to lead in the state of Texas. However, things have changed. The state of Utah, Trump is only leading by 10.4 points. That's pretty significant, considering the fact that Republicans in the state of Utah are not too favorable towards the current incumbent president. A third-party candidate got over 20% of the vote back in 2016. Basically, it's a protest vote against President Trump. So, yeah. The state of Vermont, going to go safe for the Democrats. No real contention there. State of Virginia, 11.4 points for Joe Biden. The Republicans, I don't even think they're going to campaign in the state of Virginia, and I personally wouldn't. That's a waste of money for the Republicans in 2020. The state of Washington, a safe state for Joe Biden. Next up, the state of West Virginia. No real polls out of there. However, I expect it to be safe for the Republicans. The state of Wisconsin, a state that, is probably going to be one of the closest states in 2020. 7.1 points for Joe Biden. That's very significant. The fact that it is going so much so towards, towards Joe Biden is pretty crazy. I forgot about the states of Montana. Let me go back to that. 8.3 points towards current President Trump. I could see that happening on election day. Probably a little bit more towards Trump. Maybe between the 10 to 15 point range is more realistic. The state of Wyoming, no polls out of there currently. However, I do see it going towards Trump by an extremely large margin. The state of Kentucky, I also forgot about that state. Sorry, my apologies. But getting close to being narrowed down to a likely margin. However, still a safe Republican seat, and probably going to be either safe or likely on the Senate level as well. I don't think Amy McGrath is going to do super great on election night. However, this is the current electoral map as according to polling averages as of August 24th, 2020. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know any suggestions, and if you think this map is actually plausible on election day. So thank you guys so much, and see you tomorrow.